Welcome to the first ever post Liam Hendricks sharing socks. This is going to be a three-legged pair of socks this time around. I'm Leigh Allan, the duty geezer at Southside Socks, along with my son and West Coast correspondent Will. And we have with us a Liam Hendricks whisperer, Eric Loughlin, who apparently is so loaded with information about Liam Hendricks that the rest of us can probably just leave and come back in half an hour and then sign off. But Will, in case you need to get a word in edgewise before Eric gets started.
Yeah, well, first, just want to say I'm going to save all opinions about Liam Hendricks till after we've talked to Eric a little bit. But I will say that I'm going to propose that we get rid of Liam Hendricks immediately and go for, number 45 has been a hot topic today as he was impeached for a second time. And we're talking about closers. Well, I want to bring back the greatest number 45 ever to play the game. You can see him behind me, Bobby Jenks. That dude, he is probably at home in his backyard throwing 110 straight into like a little mountain of beer cans. And
I was going to say 110 beer cans that he was throwing.
I thought you were going to say kilometers an hour. So, we're both thinking in other units.
So my proposal is to, sort of ghost on Hendricks and go with Jenks. I know it's not going to be a popular opinion, but much like a lot of our Congress people, I'm not playing politics. I'm putting team above party, and Jenks is the answer.
Well, certainly a reasonable move.
Strong arguments.
All right, Eric. All right, fine. Tell us about this deal.
Okay, so I want to go back to the day he was signed, because the day that Hendricks got signed, and I saw 3 years, $54 million, I actually texted Will, and I said, I don't like this deal. And we were talking about, part of the reason why that was, and one of the reasons I said, well, is I feel like it's an overpay for a closer. And I feel like it is money that's spent in one place that could be better spread around, right? If you're going to spend $18 million a year AAV on a relief pitcher, my thought was that you could get two guys to do the same job as one for about that same amount of money. And the first thing that I came upon when I started pulling the numbers was that's actually not necessarily the case. Hendricks compared to other closing leagues. So I pulled up the top 5 guys who've been paid relief pitchers money-wise, right? So they're Kenley Jansen. Ian Kennedy made the list because he was converted to a relief pitcher. Then you have Mark Melancon. Then you have Hendricks. Then you have Aroldis Chapman. Then you have Craig Kimbrell. And then you have Will Smith. And I pulled all of their numbers. I pulled their ERAs, their FIPs, their ERA plus. I did their strikeouts per 9, their walks per 9. Then I got their strikeout minus walk ratio. I pulled their whips, and I pulled their saves. Just in case, right? Because we all know closers get paid for saves, whether they should or shouldn't necessarily have that conversation later. But the interesting thing that I found was numbers-wise, so we could start with ERA plus, right, which is his ERA compared to the league, and I did it over the last 3 years, so from 2017 to 2019. Of those guys that I named, Hendricks' ERA plus actually is a third. It's behind. He's only one lower than Kenley Jansen, who Kenley Jansen has a 149 ERA plus, Hendricks sitting at 148. And then everybody's really below Chapman. Fourth. Kimbrell actually does have a better ERA plus over 3 years. Obviously, was amazing with Boston.
Not so much. Quickly get in, sure. Just because you mentioned, and I know you're probably going to say it, change the numbers around in a bit, but so that we have it fairly continuous with when you said it, the 54 is 4 years. So we're not looking at $8 million.
Here's the funny thing about the 54. Yes.
It's three or 4 years.
It's 3 or 4, but the option and the buyout are the same amount of money. So he's guaranteed $54 million. The difference is that if he takes the buyout, he gets bought out over 10 years. So this is one of those sneaky things that agents do with contracts where the AAV of the contract is the highest ever given to a reliever at $18 million. But the reality of it is that if he gets paid the buyout, he's going to get the last 15 million of the deal over the next 10 years.
Okay.
So if you adjust for inflation, the actual value of the deal is, you could make a case that it's less than 54 million. They did the same thing with Scherzer. They did the same. I said he got Bonilla because they did the same thing with Bobby Bonilla for the Mets.
Well, Bobby Bonilla is going to be paid till
Forever.
3000, I think.
Yeah, but if they keep him, it comes down to, I think it's 13, 15.
Certainly correct.
Something along those lines.
And
So
you got to figure if they keep him, he's pitching worth $15 million, which, judging by his numbers, right, and how much he got paid, I think you could make the case that it, at the very least, was not an overpay. They went to get a top closer. Yes, they paid top closer money. Top closers are more expensive than they used to be. So I don't necessarily think they got a deal on the guy, but he's been one of the best arms, relief pitcher-wise, over the last 3 years.
But what do you think about, he's going to turn 32 in 4 weeks.
Good point. The other closers who also got paid this money also got paid around their age 30, 31. So Melanson is Kenley Jansen, I think, is the youngest of them. Kimbrel also got paid just before his 31st. Will Smith got paid just before his 30th.
Okay, I'm gonna argue with you here just for a moment. The two names that I've heard people cringe about the most on their own teams coming in late in the game. This last World Series, the question was always, are the Dodgers going to be brave enough to let Kenley Jansen pitch? And then before that, it was, are the Cubs going to be brave enough to let Craig Kimbrel go out there and pitch? These aren't guys who necessarily have knocked it out of the park with the most recent time of their deals. So you're talking about potentially Hendricks, he could be good for 2 years and then you're going to eat $30 million.
Well, so the argument I would make is the Dodgers did end up going to Kenley Jansen when it counted, and they did win a World Series.
Yeah, no, they did.
The other name you gave me was Kimbrel. I think the Cubs did go to Kimbrel, and granted, he looked ugly a bunch, and he doesn't look like the pitcher that he was. But they did go to him, and he has been effective. I think
he still hasn't gotten that arm fixed.
I got to jump in here. Just say that Craig Kimbrel looks ugly. I think we shouldn't be getting into that. We should be talking about baseball.
So to be fair, I told my wife about Liam Hendricks, and I was like, he's the only Australian playing in the game. And she was like, oh, he's probably a hottie. And I was like, you know what? I think he might be a major beefcake. And then I Googled him, and that is not the case.
He's beefcake-esque. He's on the beefcake.
He's beefcake in theory, but not in reality.
Yeah. He's definitely lower than Colomé and Cordero on the beefcake level. But as far as fastball velocity is concerned, I mean, he's right up there.
Speaking of Colomé, how do you feel about Hendricks versus keeping Colomé? Because there would have been a pretty crazy price difference there, I think.
So I think that's the interesting thing that we don't know, right? Is how much is Colomé asking for? B, I do think that the White Sox ultimately will end up bringing Colomé back. One of the other things that I liked about the deal is, I think these are the kinds of things that when you're going for a championship, these are the kinds of moves that championship teams make. The Yankees had a dangerous bullpen. The Astros had a dangerous bullpen. The Dodgers had a dangerous bullpen. I mean, these are the kinds of things that make, when you look at championship teams, what they're made of. Nowadays, they have top-line back-end stuff. The Tampa Bay made a whole season on having relievers who could all come out and throw one or two innings.
Kansas City won a World Series.
Kansas City won without an ace for the first time in however many years. So
whoa! Don't let Johnny Cueto hear that.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Yordano Ventura, rest in peace. But, either way.
No.
Against
I'm going to disagree with you on Colomé coming back. He's not coming back.
I didn't think so.
And I think the per year for this coming year is not substantially different. They would have ended up paying Colomé about $10 million versus for the year. So it's the length of the contract that really makes a difference. Colomé is probably going to take 1 year where he goes, at most 2. Where he ends up being.
Well, but I mean, and that's my thing, right? Is if the argument is Colomé at 2 years, right, or Hendricks at 3, possibly 4. I'll take Hendricks at 3, possibly 4, because the other thing that I think people really don't realize, and this is another thing about his numbers, he has been one of the best pitchers in relief for the past 2 years. His numbers in 2019 were absolutely insane. He was a sub-2 FIP. He was striking out 12 plus guys per 9. His fastball, so I was looking at pitch values for a while, which I've got some information on. His fastball was like 13 runs above average as far as a pitch value is concerned. I mean, he had a 3.9 WAR as a relief pitcher in 2019. I mean, the guy's stuff it's better than you think it is. And he's one of those guys who I think, you know, because I remember when he came up with the Twins and when he was with Toronto and he couldn't really find his footing. And then all of a sudden he came out of nowhere. And I think I have the reason why for that.
You have the pitch changes with you?
I do. So the funny thing about him, if you want to talk about his arsenal, is that the pitcher that Liam Hendricks came into the league in at 2011 is not the same pitcher who's pitching right now. In 2011, so here's his fastball usage, right? His splits per pitch. So 2011 with the Twins, he threw his fastball 25.8% of the time. He threw a sinker 35.4% of the time, and he threw a changeup 7% of the time, okay? So about 50% of his pitch mix was fastball sinker. Let's fast forward to 2019. That was the year he really broke out with the Athletics. His four-seam fastball usage goes from 25.8% to 67.9%. His sinker usage goes from 35.4% down to 2.9%. And his changeup usage goes from 7.4% to 0.1%. So instead of being a sinker fastball changeup pitcher, he completely abandons the changeup and he goes straight to fastball slider. He also, in that same time, his average velocity on the fastball 2011 was 90.9 miles an hour. His average fastball velocity 2019 was 96.8 miles an hour.
That's huge.
That's 7 ticks.
That's going the right direction.
7 ticks, right? He also
but then by the 4th year of this contract, it should be at 102.5.
Yeah, right. By that, he'll be throwing 130.
Anything less is unacceptable, really.
And, you know, you got to figure, right, he's going to lose some ticks on that fastball 3rd or 4th year. You would expect that to be the case around 33, 34. But the good news that I think is you have a guy who came into the league who was mixing a fastball and a sinker, who is getting more ground balls, who is more of a pitch to contact person. I also have his ozone swing rates and his ozone contact rates. So the amount of times that batters were swinging at pitches out of the zone and making contact has dropped 20% since he was in 2011 to now. So in abandoning that sinker and that fastball, which I think was allowing hitters to settle in, and bringing just the fastball and the slider has made him more effective at, you know, I've watched the guy pitch, right? You know the fastball is coming. He's almost like Chapman in the way where you know the fastball is coming. You know it's coming and you still can't hit it because it's too fast, and you still have to watch for the slider that breaks off the plate. And if you're
it's not just too fast, but it moves.
Yeah, exactly. It's got some giddy up. So, you know, I think that obviously if he loses some ticks on that fastball, that'll decrease some of his value. But man, I mean, it's like this is a 3-year deal. If you have Colomé for 2, who knows if Colomé is going to be good next year? I mean, relievers have volatility, right? That's what we get when we get shaky about those free agent deals for closers. Is Definitely. 1 year they're good, the next year they're absolutely trash. But the thing I like about this guy is you're talking about somebody who's a predominantly fastball pitcher, right? He does throw that slider, but he's predominantly a 4-seam fastball pitcher. I feel like those guys have better lengths on their arm because they're not cracking off sliders all the time. And you know, even if he goes down a couple of ticks in velocity, you go from 98 to 95, 94, that's still
a lot better than 90.
Average. Yeah, it's still a lot better than 90, 91. I mean, you're not talking about someone who's risking going from 95 to 90, right? It's someone who's going from 98, 99 down to 96, 95. So
well, he's not throwing 99. We can't credit him with throwing 99.
I've seen him crack 99. I've seen the guy pitch.
He's actually sort of our crafty righty after the Hoyer and crowd get through throwing their the rest of our 99 mile an hour guys get down, bring it down and we get the slow stuff throw.
I mean,
Well,
I certainly don't think this is a bad signing by any means. I mean, Hendricks has proven himself the last couple years, and our bullpen is gonna be fierce.
Gonna be good.
I mean,
yeah.
it is gonna be really, really
good.
hard to win games late. And for a team that has a potent offense that I expect, Yoan Moncada said that he's feeling himself again. You're talking about a lot of games that we're going to take leads into those last couple innings. And now, I mean, I don't want to face Crochet, Bummer, and Hendricks 3 innings in
I
a
don't
row.
know that Crochet will be there, at least for much of the year. I think they're going to try to stretch him out in the minors because they want him to be a starter eventually.
Yeah, true.
Something that I looked at, I looked at the projections, and these are the Baseball Reference. I'm not sure which of the sets they use for this, but how they project the other relievers for 2021. And these are all guys who had ERAs of 2 or below, right around 2 or below this past season. They don't like them. They're not saying they're going to be bad coming up, but Hoyer, for example, projection is a 3.79, a 1.211 whip, go 4-3. Foster, a 3.90, go 6-3, again, a whip 1.2 or so. Marshall, 4-3 with a 3.84 ERA. Crochet with a 4.09 ERA. So they don't expect that kind of production out of those guys. I don't know why. I will say that you can't have a schedule, even though our division is absolute trash, you can't have a schedule that easy again, where you don't ever have to play the American League East and West. So that could have an influence on what pitchers' numbers.
But those numbers should be a lot lower. I mean, the Cleveland Washington football team, baseball team has gotten rid of everybody.
Yeah, no, they have one hitter.
Yeah.
So the projections are interesting to me, but projections are projections. They are what they are. But apparently, there's not the faith outside of the White Sox that we have in that collection of relievers. Now, Bummer is still Bummer. I mean,
I was gonna say, what do they have Bummer there for?
For some reason they didn't write that one down. But Bummer, I think, was right along as usual.
I don't understand those numbers. I mean, I actually think Foster and Hoyer are gonna come out banging.
So it depends if they're using a projection system called Zips, which is the one that Fangraphs uses. I believe that what Zips does is Zips factors in a couple of different things, which include your previous year's numbers and your age relative to the league. So one of the things, and again, I have to double check because I don't know whether Baseball Reference uses Zips or not, but one of the things that I know certainly could hurt Marshall is going to be he's been in the league for about, I think it was Marshall, maybe it was Foster. It's one of those two guys. I think it's Marshall. He's bounced around the league for a little bit. He's been about an 8-year veteran. He's got some other MLB.
Yeah.
He's got little bits of numbers here and there. I think the other thing about Zips that's tough with relievers to project is, listen, if you pitch 60 innings, right, and you've got a bad 6-inning stretch, your ERA is going to balloon. So ERA, I think, is a really tough one to gauge relief pitchers by, because that might not tell the whole story of your whole season. Like I remember, again, Mets fan, sorry, but Edwin Diaz, when he was going through his absolute teardown with the Mets, if you really looked at his numbers, I mean, the guy was still striking out 30% of the hitters he was facing. He was still throwing 99 miles an hour. His pitches still had movement. The big problem was he gave up 7 more home runs than he did last year. Those 7 more home runs happened to come in.
I'm glad you mentioned that with the strikeouts. In all of these cases, they're predicting the guys to have more than 1 strikeout in inning.
And those are the numbers.
To still be there, the swings and misses to still be there, but the contact apparently to be more efficient on the part of opposing offenses. I want to get into the business side of this and what else is going on, but maybe we should take our break first. Will?
Yeah, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll yield the floor to the geezer. All right, we are back. Eric has gotten to state his very strong case, I'd say, actually, for the Liam Hendricks deal. Well done.
Thank you.
Dad, you want to talk about the business side of it?
Yeah, but one thing I'm curious, I'd love to find out if the reason Jerry Reinsdorf opened his wallet for this much money for a closer is because his great good buddy Tony is the closer guy, and he convinced him to do it. But when we looked at that, when I first looked at it, boy, they're going to pay. We're calling it an average 13.5 million for a closer, and they're going to pay Lynn is 9.3 million, and they've been talking them Eaton 7 million. Boy, they're going to go out and spend it. Fact is, the payroll right now is less than it was going into last year. Now, of course, last year ended up being prorated, but what it would have been had there been an entire season, because saving 10.5 million on Colomé, 12 million on Encarnacion, 9 million on Kelvin Herrera. Do we remember him? 5.6 on Mazzara, 5.4 on McCann. So really, this is projecting out right now as a $119 million payroll. That 130 that they were going to be for 2020 was 18th in Major League Baseball. We're the third largest city in the United States. But that's where we sat. Being 18th is a big deal. But they keep saying the money will be spent, the money will be spent, the money will be spent. But will it? Now, what you're missing on this 119 projection right now, you've got, they've done most of the arbitrations they've solved by settling. There are two left. One is Reynaldo Lopez, and if they offer him more than the ham sandwich and maybe a side of fries, they
take it.
The other one, though, is Lucas Giolito. And this is penciled in, the guys who do these projections for pay at coming in at 3.9 million. That's insane. That is insane that they would get away in arbitration with only paying Giolito 3.9 million.
There's no way. There's no way.
Drew Smiley's getting 11 million, and the Sox are paying their own starters. They're Keuchel 18. I said Lynn 9.3. And now a reliever 13.5 on an average if we take it over the 4 years. Now Giolito is represented by creative artists, which in your line of work is the very top of the heap you can possibly be, I guess. In baseball, not so much. I looked it up. I looked at a whole list of these. Obviously, the big one is Boros, but creative artists has a lot of baseball players. They don't have a lot of stars. They have Buster Posey, which is a huge star. But after that, Giolito's one of the best ones they've got. So I would think they're going to get him pushing for whatever they can push out there. And of course, there's talk of will they go for a long-term contract, which Hahn is pretty good at getting team-friendly long-term contracts. But where do you guys think? Where do you see a Giolito arbitration ending up as? And of course, arbitration, two sides put in their money, arbitrator picks one.
Yeah, I mean, I first off, I actually think Giolito will sign a long-term deal. He loves it in Chicago, and he has become the face of this team in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of faces because we're a loud team now. You got Tim and Eloy and Jose, and but Giolito has blossomed into a Chicago star in a lot of ways. I mean, if you go on the social media and whatnot, Giolito is beloved by this city. Do I think it's going to be an incredibly team-friendly deal? I don't know, because he's going to demand money and he deserves a lot of money. But I do anticipate him signing a longer deal to stay in Chicago and see this rebuild out through the end of a World Series, hopefully too.
Okay, I'll play devil's advocate. So if I'm the White Sox, I take him to arbitration, and I make the case against him. I think he's a great, talented pitcher. I'd love to see him on a long-term deal.
What's your offer?
I would love. If I was Chicago, well, what did they say? Did they give the numbers that they filed for?
No, they haven't.
3 point.
No, there's just a guess at 3.9 is where it would end up. I don't know whether that was his number.
I mean, somewhere in the I would probably file somewhere in the 3 to 7 ballpark and try to see if I can't get him under 9 or 10 million. My argument as the White Sox would be, yes, he had a very good year last year, but he had a very good stretch of starts. He wasn't amazing necessarily. It was a shortened season, so we don't really know how he handles over the long term. The year before that was a plagued year for him where, he was not a star pitcher. So, we haven't necessarily
seen. 2019, he was a star pitcher. 2018 is when he was bad.
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So, I think that the track record for the guy isn't again, and I'm playing devil's advocate. I love Lucas Giolito, and I would love to see him sign a long-term deal. But if I'm the White Sox, I try to take him to arbitration. And the reason is because I think with pitchers especially, right, it's tough to sign that long-term extension, that long-term contracts. I mean, I remember when John Dank signed his deal, which was the largest deal that Chicago handed out for a starting pitcher at the time. And that looked like a lock solid, amazing contract, cheap guy making good money. And he turned out to, he pitched decently, but I think that in the long run, he didn't end up pitching quite to what they thought they would get out of that extension. So I'm a little bit wary of extending younger pitchers if I don't absolutely have to. I don't know how long it is till Giolito hits free agency, if this is his first go through of arbitration.
This is his first year.
Or his second. But if it's his first year, I let him go through arbitration once. I see how he pitches the year, and I come back to him about a long-term deal next spring. That would probably be, if I'm a GM, that's probably how I would go. I'd let it sense. Yeah. Because you got to figure out if he's good another year, now you're really going to have to pay him out in arbitration, especially if he places in the Cy Young voting again. And now I can come to him with an extension and say, all right, well, you're going to get, 10 to 15 million probably in arbitration. So let's talk extension. That's like 15 million and gets up to 20 and 25 and 25. And then I could see like a 4 to 5 year, $120 million contract extension instead of going through his second round of arbitration. But, I hate to be that guy, but I think the way baseball is managed from a money perspective, I take him through arbitration this year and let the process work itself out.
All right. Playing tough with Lucas Giolito.
I love you, Luke. I'm sorry. I love you, buddy. I really do.
Eric, how come you haven't brought up before how much you hate Lucas Giolito?
And
apparently you don't like his high school coach either.
Yeah, what are these jerks?
Before we go, let's talk about what we think could still be done outside of the guys we already have. What do you think could happen? Are we going to go out and get another name, or are we going to kind of sit here with what we have now?
Gotta get a backup catcher. And that's a cheapie. It's a couple $1,000,000. It's not a big deal, but we cannot sit there with Collins as the backup catcher. Cannot.
Well, I have bad news for you. We're gonna have Collins.
They go for a mid-range starting pitcher. I don't have a name for it, but somebody on the level of an Odorizzi.
Okay. Well, I could see, I was looking at Odorizzi too, and I was looking at the free agent listings. For me, I think that the most obvious choice is to bring back Colome. And part of the reason that I would be gung-ho for that is I think they have good balance throughout the lineup. I think that you are going to have some depth with starting pitching. It never hurts to have more starting pitching, so I could see another mid-range guy like an Odorizzi or someone, to pick up a number 5 slot. But if Giolito is great, you've got Giolito, you've got Keuchel, you've got Lynn. I mean, you have the starting 3 of your rotation. And
Dylan Cease.
Sorry.
I was thinking Michael Kopech, but
Kopech too as well. But see, you've got depth
there, to bring
right?
something out of the cellar. That's all right.
You've got some depth. But Colome for me is the key because he gives you that if Bummer is great and Hendricks is great, you have that same 3-legged monster that other amazing bullpens have, where it's not just a question of who's going to pitch the 9th, right? It's who's going to pitch my high leverage situations, and I've got 3 different guys to go to.
What's your pick, Will? What are you going for?
I mean, I love the idea of bringing back Colome. The bullpen is already looking real tough. And if they were able to bring him back at a reasonable price, now the last thing I want to do is go spend a lot on Colomé because we just dropped it on Hendricks. If we're going to spend
I
money,
don't think the reasonable price is available.
yeah, and I'm not even sure. Obviously, we need a backup catcher. In my dream world, we'd go after like a DJ LeMahieu, but I know that that's never going to happen price wise either, because LeMahieu's going to make bank in whatever deal he gets. And then it seems like the right field situation, they've already landed on Adam Eaton, and it's going to be Adam Eaton. I don't want to go out and drop tons of money on George Springer. I don't even know about, I wouldn't even necessarily drop a ton on Ozuna.
What about a half a ton or quarter ton on Rosario to play left so that Eloy becomes the DH?
Eddie Rosario?
Where should be?
Yeah.
Eddie
I mean,
Rosario?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Again, you've got this issue of Eloy doesn't want to be the DH. I think he'll grow out of that very quickly once he discovers that the other guys they put out there can catch the ball. And once he realizes that he can just sit around and crush dingers all day. Rosario is an interesting choice for sure to play left. We definitely need help out there. Is Rosario left-handed or right-handed?
I think he's.
He is lefty, right? Yeah,
He is
lefty.
He's lefty. Yeah, then I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I like the case for a lot of depth. It's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, so I want to go off the field and into the stands. Presuming we have fans in the stands at some point, we have concessions. We already know we have weaknesses in the Cuban concessions. We need better Cuban sandwiches. We need arroz con pollo. We need ropa vieja. Got to do this for our Cuban.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh
We've
yeah.
now got an Australian. Now, Australian food, we talk about, throw another shrimp on the barbie, but that's not really what they do. They eat Vegemite. Vegemite is what we call an acquired taste. It's something about burned yeast and vegetable residues and smeared onto a piece of toast. It's awful. So the only way to balance that is Australian and American heritage back, bearing in mind we need to go for scones and finger sandwiches because our new manager likes the tea party.
How long you been sitting on that one?
I've been working on it.
That was a wild ride.
I did all this for Liam Hendricks, and you're bringing in the tea party jokes.
I was trying to beat you to it, and I just could not figure out where that was going.
Don't even need.
I love the idea of a sensible cucumber finger sandwich at a baseball game. The only issue is I don't want to spend $17.50 on it, which is probably what it would cost to have a fresh vegetable at a guaranteed rate field. It's not looking good anyway.
Whoa! Where else are you going to get traditional Australian food in the south side of Chicago?
That's a really good point. I mean, are they going to start?
Pay you to eat the Vegemite?
Are they going to keep Foster's on tap? Is that what we're going to do to honor Liam Hendricks? I think we could see that. My hope, honestly, is just that we get to sit in that ballpark and eat anything next year.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I would eat a bag of dirt
in October. I'll tell you that right now. I'll eat anything.
I think by midsummer. That's my prediction is midsummer, not at the beginning. And I still think if it's any earlier, it will be upon showing the evidence that you have been vaccinated.
Well.
Quite possible. I think they could open to very limited fans before that, which for me, I actually prefer watching sports that have no fans to the SEC football games that have 10,000 people there. And it just seems like no one wanted to go. Whereas when it's empty, you're like, oh, pandemic. But watching Alabama and Ohio State and seeing the 12 people out there cheering, not with other people, until you get to the streets of Tuscaloosa for the super spreader event.
Go to the bars
but the game itself was very underwhelming to watch. I hope midsummer's right. As soon as it's safe to do so, I will be there. I will fly to Chicago. I would love to see the the White Sox, maul these dreadful AL Central teams and the NL Central, but we'll see what happens. I know Margarita Man's, he's got to be going broke without you, Eric.
I haven't seen him there in years. I swear to you, I watch for him every time I go to the White Sox field because I told him to remember my face in 2014 and he didn't. And I have not seen the Margarita Man in 2 years. I don't know what's going on. I think they cut it.
He probably settled a harassment lawsuit with the White Sox and retired because
I was sending his kids to college.
Well, whatever it was, the cons outweighed the pros, man. So I don't know what your demeanor was with the Margarita Man, but you're right. The last like 2 or 3 times we've gone to games, he has blatantly avoided you.
I've been looking. I've literally been paying more attention to the stands looking for the Margarita Man than the game, and he was not there. I miss you, Margarita Man.
How can you enjoy a game without a tall glass of sugar ice?
I don't know.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Eric, for doing your homework for the first time, I would assume, in your life,
right?
Which is really cool.
Finally.
Any final thoughts from the geezer?
Nah.
All right, the Oracle at Delphi has said nah. And we will see what happens in this upcoming week, but we're not that far off from spring training. It's going to be it's going to be an exciting year. So thanks again, Eric, and we will see you guys next time.